I came back from the airport just because I forgot my passport. No one in the house knew I'd be returning so soon. The door was unlocked, the house was silent, but the moment I walked past the kitchen, I froze. My daughter-in-law was standing in front of my husband, too close, too cold, and what I heard next sent a chill through my entire body. If you've ever walked in at a moment no one expected, you'll understand what I witnessed. Before I continue, let me know where in the world you're watching from. And if you enjoy true personal stories like this, don't forget to hit like and subscribe so I can keep sharing the ones I never thought I'd have the courage to tell. Now, let's begin. After being discharged from the military, he and I returned to our hometown to live a simple life on a small piece of land. He never complained, never showed weakness, until the day a stroke left him bedridden. He had served in the Army for 25 years, passing through countless battlefields. He fought in the Middle East during those brutal years of bombs and bloodshed. In 2005, he was awarded the Medal of Honor for saving 3 fellow soldiers during an ambush. After retiring, we bought nearly a hectare of land on the outskirts of town. A man once accustomed to the sound of gunfire now calmly lived among the sounds of shovels and hoes. And yet now, that same man can't even swallow a spoonful of porridge on his own. He can't resist, can't speak, only endure in silence. For the past 3 years, I've cared for him with my own hands, every meal, every night of sleep, every dose of medicine. I've barely left his side. But then one day, our children gathered and suggested taking turns caring for their father, each of them a few days at a time, so I could rest. I agreed. Not because I needed the rest, but because I believed it was time they understood what it meant to care for a sick father. To give myself peace of mind, I wrote down in a notebook the routine I usually follow. 7:00 a.m., give Christopher his blood pressure medication and breakfast. 11:00 a.m., lunch and heart medication. 3:00 p.m., milk and light physical therapy. 5:00 p.m., second dose of blood pressure medication and dinner. 8:00 p.m., wipe his body, change his diaper, and help him to bed. I placed the notebook right at the head of the bed, clearly marking each time slot, carefully as if entrusting a part of my own heart. On the first day, my son's wife, Jessica, came to take care of him. In the afternoon, he had a seizure, his face turned pale and bluish, his body trembling slightly. Panicked, I ran to the neighbor's house for help, then rushed back to grab his medicine. About 15 minutes later, he began to calm down. His breathing evened out, and the pain started to subside. I asked Jessica, "Did you give him his medicine?" Jessica didn't answer. She just glanced at me, then turned away as if I were the one overreacting. I didn't say anything more. I just gently reminded her, he needs to take his meds on time. My voice wasn't loud, but my heart sank. The second day, Jessica came again, and again he had another episode. I ran to the drawer. The pill strip was partly empty, just as scheduled. The medicine had been taken out, but had it ever actually made it into his mouth? I knew all too well. The doctor once warned me that missing or delaying even a single dose would cause him pain. But if he had taken the pills, why was the pain so intense, like the medication had never worked at all? Something wasn't right, and I began to worry. When Jessica stepped outside to take a call, I walked over to the cabinet. There was a single pill lying in the deep corner, still and hidden, like it had been tucked away on purpose. I bent down and opened the trash bin nearby. The top was full of tissues and snack wrappers, but something about it unsettled me. I gently sifted through. At the bottom, mixed in with scraps of paper, were several crushed blister packs, and a few capsules still whole, dusted in grime. I stared at them, my chest tightening like a hand had gripped my heart. There was nothing more anyone needed to say. That night I spoke with Matthew, my second son. He frowned, shook his head. "Mom, maybe you're just tired and confused. It's normal for someone that is sick to be in pain." I stayed silent. Inside, it felt like I was falling into a cold, empty space. I wasn't angry at him, just sad. Sad because my own child didn't believe me. Sad because the mother who once taught him to speak, carried him to get his shots, fed him spoon by spoon, was now seen as overly suspicious. I stood there in silence, 1,000 doubts swirling in my chest that I couldn't shake. The decision became clear. I quietly installed a small camera hidden carefully in a corner of the room, somewhere no one would notice, no one would know. That camera would capture everything, every gesture, every action Jessica took while caring for my husband. I couldn't let him live out the rest of his days in fear, even if it meant tearing through the silence. Then, for the next 2 days, Matthew, my second son, came back to take over. I watched closely but said nothing, and strangely, during those 2 days, he was perfectly fine. No pain returned. He ate well, took his medicine on time. Color returned to his face, and his eyes looked less strained. There was not a single sign like the ones I saw during Jessica's shifts. I recorded every detail in my notebook, told no one, just quietly observed. A few days later, Jessica returned to take over my shift. I didn't ask anything, just gave a faint smile and nodded. That night, when she went out to buy groceries, I went straight to the room. I plugged a USB into the hidden camera. Just me. The room is locked. I opened the footage from that day, my eyes locked on the screen. My heart clenched with every beat, and there it was, clear as day. 5:00 p.m., Jessica walked into the room with a bowl of porridge in one hand and the blister pack of pills I had clearly instructed her about. But she didn't open the pills, didn't give them to him. Instead, she glanced around, then walked directly to the corner of the room. I saw it her hand crushing the blister pack, removing the pills one by one and tossing them into the trash. No hesitation, no sign of inner conflict. A few minutes later, she returned, placed the porridge on the table, and tilted her head at him with a sickeningly sweet tone. "Come on, eat up. If you don't, you'll go hungry all day." Her voice so sweet it made my skin crawl. He stirred slightly, trying to turn his face away. And then, I heard it, clear as day. "Old and still burdening your children, I'm not your servant. Just die already, it'd be easier for everyone." Her voice was low, but the camera picked it up. Cold, sharp, completely devoid of emotion. I sat there for a long time, my hand resting on the keyboard, feeling like something inside me had completely collapsed. It wasn't just the pills. It wasn't just the words. It was the fact that I had doubted myself, that I'd feared I was being jealous, overly critical. Turns out, a wife's intuition, a mother's instinct, it had never been wrong. But I also knew truth is a double-edged sword, and once I pulled it out, no one in this house would remain unaffected. That night, I called Matthew. I didn't say anything to Rebecca. She was in her final month of pregnancy living in Texas, a 3-hour flight from here. I didn't want to burden her with this or cause her more stress. My hand trembled as I held the phone. My eyes were still fixed on the screen on Jessica coldly crushing the blister pack and throwing the pills straight into the trash. Every word she had spoken to him, every cruel glance, still echoed in my head. When Matthew picked up, my voice broke. "Son, you have to let me finish everything." I told him everything, the mysteriously missing pills, the pain that only returned when Jessica was around, and the footage from the hidden camera that had captured it all. There was silence on the other end. No denial, no defense of Jessica like before, just Matthew's breathing slow and heavy. Then finally, a quiet, choked whisper. Why would she do something like that? I didn't know exactly what my son was apologizing for not believing me, for letting his father suffer, or for realizing in the end that even he hadn't imagined how bad things really were. All I knew was this: from that moment on, none of us could ever go back to the way things were. 2 days later, Matthew flew back after a short business trip in Chicago. No warning, no message. I heard the car pull up at the gate, then his hurried footsteps crossing the porch. The door swung open. My son stood there, his shirt still wrinkled dark circles under his eyes from lack of sleep. He didn't say a word. He just walked over and held me tightly. I didn't cry, but when his arms wrapped around my shoulders, my entire body seemed to collapse, like a weight I'd been carrying for far too long had finally been lifted. "Where's the camera?" Mom, I nodded and led him upstairs. Neither of us said another word. Matthew sat down, opened the laptop, and rewound the footage. Second by second, minute by minute, his eyes never left the screen. When it reached the part where Jessica threw the pills into the trash and turned around to scold his father, Matthew's hand clenched into a fist so tight his knuckles went white. No questions needed, no more denial, just the truth, raw and cold, between mother and son. The following afternoon, Matthew and I sat together, flipping open the care schedule notebook. No words were necessary. I quietly picked up a pen and drew a thin line through the name Jessica in the coming weeks. No red ink, no strike, through no marks, just gone. As if she was never there to begin with. We split the schedule again, evenly. Matthew said he would request to work remotely for a while. I was deeply grateful, but I didn't say it out loud. After dinner, I asked Jessica to step out onto the back porch. The wind was light, the sky already dark. The yellow porch light cast a soft glow across her face. I think you should take a break from caring for him, I said calmly. Focus on your work. Don't let things at home get in the way anymore. Jessica looked up at me as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Then she smiled. No, thank you. No guilt. I just watched as she turned away and walked back into the house, light on her feet, almost satisfied, as if she'd just been released from some burden. But I knew some debts don't show up on paper. They live in the memories of those who remain. And sometimes memory is the longest sentence of all. That night, my phone rang. It was Ethan, Rebecca's husband. Before I could say anything, his voice came through fast and anxious. Mom, the doctor says Rebecca's showing signs of early labor. She might give birth within the next few weeks. I know it's short notice, but could you come out and help us? You're the only person Rebecca wants with her right now. I stood still, as if all the air had been sucked from my lungs. Outside, the late afternoon sun spilled soft golden light across the porch. In my mind, I saw my husband lying in the bedroom, frail and silent. Then the paused video still playing on the laptop, Jessica's face cold as stone, her words like blades stabbing into his heart. I looked at Matthew. He stayed silent as if he already understood everything I was feeling inside. On one side was my husband, the man I had shared a lifetime of hardship with, now being treated so cruelly. On the other side, my daughter, my own flesh and blood, is about to give birth, needing me by her side. They both needed me. And I was just one woman with hands that no longer held much strength. I had to choose, and I knew the cost of that choice would follow me for the rest of my life. I told Matthew. He told me to go, that he would come home as soon as he finished work to take care of Dad. Go to her mom. She needs you more than ever right now. I knew Matthew was right, but I also knew that my leaving meant placing the entire burden back on his shoulders. I wasn't young anymore. Caring for someone bedridden is an entire battle of its own, but she was my daughter. She was about to become a mother for the first time, and she was alone over there. That night I came across an old letter. His handwriting was shaky and uneven. I know the day will come when you have to make decisions for both of us. I trust you, because you've always been stronger than you think. I gripped the edge of the letter tightly. I packed my things, organized the medicine cabinet, laid everything out for Matthew, wrote down careful notes for every little detail. Then I stepped outside, looked back at the house, and told myself to stay strong, stronger than ever. My flight was early the next morning. I didn't know when I would return, but I knew this Rebecca needed me now. I had to be there. Everything was ready. I locked the door and rolled my suitcase out to the gate. The car I had booked had just pulled up. But halfway to the airport, I suddenly remembered I'd forgotten my passport at home. Frustrated, I asked the driver to turn back, anxious, afraid I'd miss the flight. I had no idea that returning home that one last time would lead me to witness something I could never have imagined. As the car pulled up to the gate, I saw Kevin's car driving away from the house. I figured he'd just gone out to grab something and would be back soon. The house was strangely silent, no sign of Jessica. I stepped inside and walked quickly to the shelf in the living room cabinet where I kept my passport. My mind was still tangled, torn between worrying about Rebecca and the haunting image of Christopher from the video. I had just pulled the passport out and was about to turn to leave when bang! A strange noise echoed from the bedroom, something heavy hitting the floor. Then came yelling, harsh, frantic, unhinged. I froze, my breath caught in my chest, heart pounding in my ears. I rushed down the hallway. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. I reached out and pushed it open, and what I saw inside stopped me cold. Jessica was holding a pillow down over Christopher's face. She was screaming, her voice cracking with fury. Die already! Why won't you just die? I lunged forward without thinking. My hands were trembling uncontrollably, but I still managed to pull her off him. She jolted back, startled, stammering incoherently. Her eyes were wild, panicked, and unstable, caught between fear and madness. I dropped to my knees beside the bed, wrapping my arms around him. Christopher was lying on his back, eyes wide open in shock. His breathing came in rapid, shallow bursts, like it might stop at any moment. His face was flushed red, sweat soaking his hair and collar. His body was ice cold. I pressed my hand to his chest, feeling each fragile breath quiver through his ribs. He was still alive, but the look in his eyes, I will never forget that look. All I could do was hold him tightly, not to keep him warm, but as if I were trying to hold on to his soul to keep it from falling into the abyss. And in that moment, I knew the line had been crossed. There was no going back. No more room for forgiveness. No more silence. I stood up. This time, it would be me who speaks. Not for revenge, but for justice. For the man who had walked through a lifetime by my side. I quietly picked up my phone and called the police. My hands still shaken, but my voice no longer uncertain. I need to file a report. Someone is seriously endangering my husband's life. Within 20 minutes, a police car pulled up outside the house. The siren pierced through the thick silence that had hung over this home for far too long. The officers asked for evidence. I said nothing, just took out my phone and played the video showing her throwing away his medication. Then came the audio, clear as day, her voice shouting, "Damn it, you useless old man." Jessica froze. For a moment, she was pale, speechless. Then suddenly she began denying everything, her voice shaky and defensive. "It wasn't me. You're twisting it. That was just... I was trying to scare him so he'd take his medicine." I looked at her. Not angry, not yelling, just a faint, emotionless smile emptied of everything. Kevin walked in just then, hearing the raised voices. He rushed over, saw me holding the phone, glanced at the video playing for just a few seconds, then turned to Jessica, grabbed her hand and said, "She didn't mean to, Mom. She was probably just exhausted." I understood, but not the way he thought. I understood that exhaustion doesn't give anyone the right to take another person's life, and blind loyalty is more dangerous than silence. I remembered back in 2018 when Kevin lost his job. It was Christopher who pulled money from his retirement savings to open a repair shop for him. I had disagreed at the time, but all Christopher said was, "He needs help. I'm his father." And now, seeing Kevin hold his wife's hand and defend her, unable to look his own mother in the eye, all I could feel was this: some people forget far too quickly who once saved them. I stood up from the chair abruptly. I could no longer hold my calm. I looked straight at both of them, my words slicing out through clenched teeth. "He's still alive. And I won't let anyone hurt him for even one more second." The room was completely silent. Jessica stood in a corner. She didn't resist, nor could she deny anything. She just stayed quiet as they cuffed her, her eyes fixed on me like she couldn't believe this was really happening. I didn't look back. There was nothing more to say. Christopher was taken to the hospital for a day of close monitoring. I rode with him in the ambulance, holding his hand. He was still breathing weakly, but the tension in his eyes had eased, as if he knew this time I had truly protected him. The next day, the police came back. They gathered more statements and carefully reviewed the footage from the hidden camera I had submitted. Everything happened fast, clear. Matthew barely left the house that entire day. He quietly cared for his father, helping me change dressings, preparing meals, organizing medication. In the afternoon, he stepped outside to make a phone call. When he returned, his eyes were red and swollen. He said nothing. I knew he had just called his brother, Jessica's husband. The two rarely had conflicts, but this time, I wasn't sure anything could be salvaged. Some things can only be faced when people stand face to face. Late that night, my phone rang. It was Rebecca. Her voice was full of worry. "Mom, I heard from Matthew. Is it true?" I stayed silent for a moment, unsure how to ease her worries even though I knew I couldn't. "Yes, it's true, but don't worry, Dad's okay." I heard her breath hitch on the other end. "Mom." I wish I were closer. It's okay, I said. Focus on your health. I've got everything under control here. But after the call ended, I sat alone for a long time. The house I knew so well suddenly felt strange. The ticking clock in the living room echoed like a countdown, counting down to something breaking, or maybe finally healing. I went over the entire care schedule once again. This time I crossed Kevin off as well. No more shift swaps, no more sharing duties. No one would be given a chance if they couldn't be trusted. I didn't wait for anyone's approval, didn't ask for permission. I acted because he was still alive, and I wasn't going to gamble with my husband's life one more time. The next morning, I arranged to meet with Attorney Miller, an old friend of mine. His office was on the third floor, no elevator. Step by step, I climbed the stairs, clutching a copy of the will tightly in my hand. Mr. Miller poured tea without beating around the bush, setting the old wooden teapot down on the table. I reached into my bag, took out the file, and placed it neatly in front of him. I want to take this to court, I said, looking him straight in the eyes. Do you think there's hope? He was silent for a few seconds, not rushing to answer. Then he nodded slowly, his voice low and steady. If you stay silent, that's the real defeat. You have evidence, witnesses, and something many don't the truth on your side. I gently clenched my fingers inside my palm. For the first time after many exhausting days, I felt a way forward, even if I didn't know where it would lead. Attorney Miller was clear. If Kevin stays quiet, the court may consider him a passive accomplice. I nodded. I didn't want to corner my own child, but I also couldn't protect anyone who chose to stay silent. Sometimes the truth needs witnesses to speak up, not just the victims. For the first time in months, I felt a calm inside me, not because I wanted to win, but because it was time to stand tall and hold on to what was right. A few days after finalizing the paperwork, Attorney Miller helped me file the lawsuit. The charge was clear elder abuse. The trial began on a Monday morning. At the courtroom, Attorney Miller submitted a video clip extracted from a hidden camera installed in my room, an undeniable piece of evidence. Along with that was my recorded testimony from the day of the incident given at the police's request. With memories still vivid in every detail, it made the atmosphere in the courtroom tense and utterly silent. The court declared defendant Jessica Williams was found guilty of serious elder abuse and intentional assault with life-threatening harm. Sentence 8 years in state prison with a permanent restraining order against contact with the victim. When the judge read the last sentence, Kevin bowed his head. As for me, I felt neither joy nor satisfaction. All I knew was that this time the truth prevailed. No noise, no bloodshed, just a video and one person brave enough to speak out. At that moment, the video was played. The scene of Jessica pushing him, yanking his hand, yelling and throwing his medication into the trash. No one spoke. Only her heavy breathing echoed through the courtroom. Jessica shrank back, lowering her eyes. I stood tall. No words were spoken. Not a single tear fell, just a sense of relief. Not from hatred, but because justice had finally spoken. 3 days later, the family meeting took place in the living room. The yellow light cast down, but it felt cold, not warm. Everyone was there except Rebecca, who couldn't make it. She sat behind her phone screen, eyes fixed on it as if wanting to join, but unable to. The room was unbearably silent. I opened the file and took out my husband's will, handing it to Lawyer Miller. He read every line slowly and clearly so everyone could hear. Matthew would receive the small garden plot and all the $500,000 in savings, with one condition: he must take good care of Christopher. Rebecca would inherit $200,000 from Christopher's retirement account. The rest, the main house where they lived, would belong entirely to Christopher's wife. Kevin was only given a military watch, a keepsake his father wore during the war. Jessica, no mention, no name, no share. I said nothing more, didn't look at anyone in the room. That night, Matthew sent the video to a close friend, Eric, with just one question. If it were you, would you stay silent? Eric was the first to write an article, titled Elder Abuse Happening Right at Home. The article made the front page of a major newspaper. A photo from the clip was featured with a brief caption, "We have been silent for too long. Less than 12 hours after the article was published, Jessica's employer issued a statement. Brief and to the point. No further investigation needed. We have reviewed the case. Jessica is terminated immediately. No excuses. No one stood up to defend her. This time, the truth was heavier than any reason. 4 hours later, the video hit 1 million views. Comments flooded in by the minute she belongs in jail. A nightmare right inside the family. Every bruise is a real crime. I didn't share or comment. Just stood back watching it all unfold like a flood, washing away the things no one dared speak of before. The last image I remember was her lowering her head as she walked out of the courthouse, hand covering her face, eyes avoiding the cameras. People lined the streets. No one spoke, just shook their heads in disappointment. Kevin called me that night, his voice low and choked. "I'm filing for divorce." I said little, just set the phone down, leaned back in my chair. No satisfaction, no celebration, because justice isn't about revenge. It was just a light shining on things people had long chosen to ignore. I was folding clothes into the closet when my phone buzzed. Rebecca's name showed up. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then answered. "Mom, I think it's time." Her voice was choked with emotion. I held my breath. "Which hospital? St. Luke, 3rd floor. They're taking me to the delivery room now." I sank down into a chair, gripping my purse tightly with one hand. "I'm on my way. Wait for me." I called a ride, pulled my wallet from my bag, put on an old jacket, and rushed out the door. Matthew would take care of Christopher while I was gone. Just as I arrived at the hospital, my phone buzzed again. A message from Matthew. I found someone. Her name's Linda. She's older, worked at a nursing home before. I read the message slowly. Seconds later, another text appeared. "I want someone who understands the elderly, not just someone who cleans." I tightened my grip on the phone, didn't reply, just looked up, staring down the long hospital corridor. I remembered one night when I was folding Christopher's blanket, Matthew called, his voice thick with emotion. "Mom, I know I'm not Kevin, but if you need me, I'll take a long leave." I didn't want all the burden on one person, but that sentence made me realize among my sons, at least one still had a heart. For the first time in months, I felt someone truly cared about him. I opened my phone and checked the home camera app. I saw Linda taking a warm cloth, gently wiping his hands, then softly saying, "Your hands are so cold, you must have been lying on your side too long." She didn't ask him any questions, just spoke like she was telling a story. I sat watching the screen, not interrupting. One thing was clear: when someone cares for a patient with love, the room no longer smells like medicine, it smells like life. Rebecca gave birth one warm morning. Her labor lasted 6 long hours. I sat outside the delivery room, fingers lightly gripping my shirt. The nurse came out and said, "A baby girl, big eyes, rosy skin." Rebecca looked at me, exhausted but smiling. "I'm going to name her Marion." I was stunned. My whole body trembled, not from worry, but because, for the first time, I felt I was continuing through this tiny new life. I held my granddaughter. Tears fell, and I didn't even realize when they started. A month later, Rebecca, Luca, Marianne, and I brought her home. Christopher had improved a lot. He was wheeled into the house in his wheelchair. He couldn't speak. Linda sat beside him as he saw his granddaughter for the first time. When I asked Linda why she chose this job, she quietly said, "My mother died in a nursing home because they gave her medicine late." I nodded, didn't ask more. I just knew some people care for the sick, not for money, but because they lost someone once and didn't have time. I remembered a few days before, Rebecca gave me an old recording, her father's voice from 2009, deep and slightly hoarse. "If you grow up and meet someone weaker than you, be the one to protect them, not the one to push them down." I played the recording again for Marion while she was asleep. I wasn't sure if she understood, but I believed that someday that memory would wake up at just the right time. Baby Marion lay curled in my arms, her cheeks, rosy eyes barely open. I turned around and caught something I hadn't seen in months. Christopher smiled, softly, slowly, but it was definitely a smile. I froze. Linda leaned in and whispered, "He's smiling, you know." Though he couldn't speak, I believed he had finally seen the light. I said nothing, just sat down beside him, placing my hand gently on his shoulder. No words were needed, because some moments just being there together is enough. I remembered when we were still at the hospital, the doctor once told me that when Christopher was still able to speak, he had the right to choose a peaceful euthanasia if he wanted. But he shook his head. "I'm not done yet. I want to see my grandchild." Now, seeing him smile at Marion, I understood. It wasn't that he feared death. He was waiting for the moment to witness life go on. That night, Rebecca found a small notebook in the drawer. It was Dad's journal from 2008 when he retired. The first page was handwritten in pen. "If I can no longer speak, this is what I want my children to remember. To love is to care for each other at our weakest." Rebecca showed it to me, her eyes red-rimmed. I was silent. Some words are not meant just to be read, but to keep the flame alive. A few days later, Kevin came back home. No excuses, just actions. I saw him carrying a bowl of medicine. He gently blew on it, then fed my father spoonful by spoonful. No forcing, no putting on a show. I watched from the end of the hallway, didn't step inside, just gave a slight nod, and then walked away. One late afternoon, Lena stopped by my house. She asked me, "Are you angry at Jessica?" No one cursed her, but no one opened their arms either. She once asked me, "If you could choose again, would you want a different daughter-in-law?" I just smiled. No one gets to choose their daughter-in-law. But I get to choose how to protect my husband, with truth and silence at the right time. One time, Linda and I were feeding Christopher dinner. I asked Linda if she had children. She smiled and said, "I have one about Kevin's age." I was about to ask more, but she looked down and said, "He hasn't come home in years. I'm used to it." I fell silent. Everyone has their own Kevin. The only difference is whether we choose silence or forgiveness. A week later, I received a letter from the Elderly Protection Agency. They notified me that Jessica had been put on a watch list for risk of elder abuse. No one came to ask me any further questions, but I knew the system had started working, not for revenge, but so that no other Christopher has to stay silent. A few weeks later, Rebecca wrote a short post on social media. No name, no photos. Just a story about an elderly mother who held her husband's hand through many sleepless months, who turned back from the airport and no one knew. The post spread quietly, not because it was overly tragic, but because many people saw their own mothers in that story. Months later, one afternoon when Marion started crawling, she picked up a small pillow, curiously placed it on his face, then giggled. I was startled. But Christopher furrowed his brow, then smiled too. Linda, standing nearby, laughed as well. This little one is quite a handful. Watching that moment, one thing was clear. Not every pillow carries violence. Some carry unconscious love. The difference is in who places it down. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the window. Christopher slept peacefully. His face relaxed, like someone who had just walked through a long storm. No one cried anymore, and no one had to suffer anymore. Everything closed gently with a sigh, with forgiveness. Not for anyone else, but for oneself.